You are now entering Module 1 segment on official communications. Please review this section and complete the assignment with a minimum score of 80%. We communicate every day in EMS with our superiors, our peers, our subordinates, our patients, hospital staff. The list continues on and on. While the major portion of this communication is usually verbal, either in person or via electronic means like the telephone or radio, we also need to communicate in a written format. This should not be a surprise. As individuals currently in or about to take on leadership roles, we've all written a patient care report, including a narrative. This block of instruction will concentrate on official written communications in the forms of memos and official letters. Additionally, we will touch briefly on electronic communications. Please note, this class is not meant to teach grammar or prose. The intent is to give you some pointers to help you communicate more effectively. These are the topics we'll cover in this block of instruction. We'll review the basics of communication to better understand what we're doing and why. We'll look at some principles of written communication that serve as guides to communicate effectively. Following that, we'll consider some questions to ask, both before starting to write and again when finished. We'll look at 3 formats of written communication you may find professionally useful. And finally, as mentioned, we'll briefly address some considerations for electronic communications, namely email and social media. When we've finished, we want you to be able to successfully complete, to the level indicated, these 5 outcomes. Identify the purposes of communication, discuss the 3 B's, discuss the principles of written communication, identify various formats for official communication, discuss considerations for using electronic communication. So, let's begin. Communication can be defined as the imparting or exchanging of information. This is done through a common system of symbols, such as letters, sounds, such as the spoken word, or signs, such as the flashing lights on an ambulance. No matter the format of communication, it is comprised of 3 parts: the sender, the message itself, and the receiver. The sender must know what information he or she wants to convey and must be able to convey it appropriately. The message must be clear and factual, and the receiver must be able to understand what the sender intended the message to convey and must be able to use the information appropriately. Within emergency medical services, there are 3 basic objectives for obtaining information. To direct, your agency chief, the sender, writes a new policy on civilians in the dorm rooms, which is the message, and sends a copy to all personnel of the agency, being the receivers. To inform, your agency's health and safety officer, is the sender, reports the results of the annual physical training test, the message, to the agency chief, who is the receiver. And finally, to persuade, your station commander, the sender, requests additional funding for a new office furniture, which is the message, from the agency chief, who is the receiver. As you can see, no matter the purpose, all types of communication has 3 components. Next, we'll look at the 3 B's. In actuality, they are the concepts of plain language. First, be clear. Whenever possible, use plain language. Avoid jargon, such as "we arrived on scene" instead of "we rolled up on the accident." Avoid the overuse of acronyms. When used, please make sure that the acronym is spelled out for the first time it is used. Use the active voice. EMT Jones began CPR, not CPR was begun by EMT Jones. Format your documents so that they are easy to read and understand. Be concise. Remove unnecessary words. Focus sentences on a single thought or action. Likewise, focus paragraphs on a single main point. Do your best to write sentences with no more than 20 words and paragraphs with no more than 7 sentences. Be specific. Include only information the reader must know. Use words with precise meaning to avoid any confusion. Also include any details that are directly relevant to the main point. Keep these concepts in mind when you sit down to write any type of document. Now that we've identified the purposes of communication and reviewed the 3 B's, the concepts of plain language, we'll examine what makes communication succeed and what makes it fail. To do this, we'll address the principles. Focused. Address the issue and nothing but the issue. This is the hallmark of communication. Failure to focus can come in 3 forms. Answering the wrong question. This happens when we don't understand the assignment. Answering only part of the question. Leaving out unflattering or difficult facts. Adding irrelevant information, including unnecessary information. Being clear, concise, and specific will help your focus. Organized. Good organization means your information is presented in a logical and systematic manner. This will allow the receiver to understand your meaning without having to read your words over and over. If your documents are not well organized, readers will become confused, frustrated, and may stop reading altogether. This will result in a communication failure and may negatively affect your credibility. Clear. There are 2 factors at play here. First, you need to understand the rules of language, how to spell words correctly, and how to assemble and punctuate sentences. Do not rely on computer spell check. Many misspellings pass through as other words. Secondly, get to the point. Don't bury your message in a jumble of words. As with organization, your failure to communicate clearly will affect your credibility. Having said that, don't let grammar and the rules of language scare you. If you feel you have weaknesses in your writing skills, there are multiple books, internet sites, and classes that can help you to improve in this area. Understood. Know your audience, the receiver, and know what they want and or need. Ensure you understand the task at hand. Mistakes in understanding the audience can lead to communication problems. Supported. Use logic and support to make your points. When writing to inform or persuade, one of your challenges will be to assemble and organize information to build your case. Support and logic are tools used to build credibility with the receiver. You should be able to see how the concepts of plain language and the principles of written communication are interrelated to achieve effective communication. As you sit down to write, ask yourself these 3 simple questions to ensure you get off on the right foot. Too many people start their projects without a clear understanding of their purpose, audience, or how to convey the information. A few minutes thinking about the answers to these questions can save hours of frustration and help you to succeed in meeting your objective. When you think you've finished, go back and ask the questions again, this time checking to make sure the document aligns with your answers. These additional considerations can serve as further guides for you. Of note, make sure you coordinate your message if that is appropriate. This requirement may be in effect if you are going outside your agency, up the chain of command beyond a certain level, or sending agency-wide communications. Always follow your agency's guidance and direction. In the absence of direction, use common sense. Let's take a quick look at 3 basic formats for official communication that you may find useful in your duties as an EMS officer. Again, and as with all things, follow your agency's guidance and direction if such is available for formatting official communications. The official memorandum is a versatile and useful format that can be used to accomplish many tasks. It can be used to send information up and down the chain of command. It can be informative or directive in nature, and it can be sent to an individual, an agency, or some subset of an agency. Examples include a chief directing ambulance drivers that gas tanks must be at least 3/4 full at shift change. A public affairs officer notifying all agency members that the annual open house event is scheduled for a particular day and time, providing initial facts. Or, as mentioned earlier, a health and safety officer reporting the results of the annual physical training test to the chief. This format may also be used in the unfortunate situation where you need to issue a letter of reprimand to an individual. The Memorandum for Record, or MFR for short, is less formal than an official memorandum. This format is used for recording important information, questions, or actions for possible future reference. As such, it is not addressed to any individual or office. Examples of when an MFR may be useful include recording the minutes of a meeting, conversation, or telephone call, documenting individual performance, good or not so good, for retention in a personnel record, or for use as a trip report. The personal letter is the format of choice when communicating outside the agency, or when a less formal tone is preferable. Examples include when responding to a compliment or a complaint by a member of the community, when thanking a member of the agency for an act particularly well done, or when corresponding with civilian leadership in your agency's chain of command, such as a city or county governing body. Our computers, tablets, iPads, smartphones put communication at our fingertips, literally. Electronic communication methods can help us move information quickly and easily, but they also present many challenges. So while email is fast, can get to many people at once, and is paperless, it can stoke as many fires as it can extinguish. It can move outside the channels for which it was intended, and it leaves a permanent electronic trail. Use the same concepts and principles for electronic communications as for more traditional written communication. This advice applies to text messages as well as email. Social media and the participation in social networking dominates our culture. It is a great way to keep in touch with family and friends and to connect with people all over, with the same common interest. Remember, however, that once information is shared electronically, it is difficult, if not virtually impossible, to control. By all means, share fun and interesting information. Just ensure that it is respectful and adheres to the law. Remember that you are personally responsible for what you post, and these posts reflect on you individually. And if you identify your association with your organization, it can reflect on your agency as well. Always follow your agency's policies and directives concerning electronic communication. This concludes our block of instruction on official communication. Remember to determine who your audience is and what their expectations are. Know what you are writing and why, and ensure your final product is in line with that purpose. Recall the principles of writing and the concepts of plain language so that your message will be well received. Spelling and grammar always count and reflect on your credibility, no matter how small the issue or informal the message. Always proofread your document. Don't depend solely on spell check. Lastly, make sure all your communications are drafted with respect and civility, regardless of the message or audience.